Welcome, welcome. Come on in, get comfortable. Whether you're lying in bed right now, sitting in your favorite chair, or maybe you're curled up on the couch with a blanket pulled up to your chin, I'm glad you're here. Really glad. This is your space now, a space where we can talk about something that affects almost every single one of us, something that keeps us up at night, something that gnaws at the edges of our thoughts during quiet moments. We're going to explore financial anxiety together, and I want you to know that whatever you're feeling about money right now, whatever worries or fears or concerns you're carrying, you're not alone in this. Before we dive into tonight's topic, I want to tell you about something special we've built. There's a community waiting for you, a Discord server where people just like you gather to talk about money, sleep, and supporting each other through the challenges we all face. It's not just a chat room or a forum. It's a place where we regularly host giveaways, money and sleep kits that can genuinely help you on your journey toward financial peace and better rest. These aren't just random prizes. They're carefully curated resources, tools, guides, and sometimes even financial support to help you take real steps forward. But here's what makes this community truly meaningful. While we do celebrate wins and share resources among ourselves, we're also focused outward. Our Discord server is actively working to gather donations that go directly to helping less privileged communities around the world. People who don't have access to basic financial education, who are struggling with poverty that most of us can barely imagine, who need support to build better futures for themselves and their families. When you join us, you're not just getting help for yourself. You're becoming part of something bigger, a movement of people who understand that our financial wellness is connected to the wellness of others, that we rise together or not at all. So after this, when you're ready, come find us. We'd love to have you there. Now, let's settle in. Take a deep breath if you want. Let your shoulders drop away from your ears. Unclench your jaw if it's tight. We're going to spend this time together exploring the psychology behind financial anxiety, and I promise you, we're going to take our time. There's no rush here, no pressure, just honest conversation about something that matters deeply. Financial anxiety isn't just worrying about money. It's so much more complex than that, so much more deeply woven into the fabric of who we are and how we move through the world. It's that feeling in your stomach when you check your bank account. It's the way your heart rate picks up when an unexpected bill arrives. It's the sleepless nights spent mentally calculating and recalculating, trying to make numbers work that maybe just don't want to work. It's the arguments with partners, the shame that creeps in when friends suggest going out and you can't really afford it, the constant background hum of stress that colors everything else you do. Think about the last time you felt truly relaxed about money. Can you even remember it? For some people, that moment never really existed. They grew up in households where money was always tight, where financial stress was as common as the air they breathed. For others, maybe there was a time before, a time when money felt easier, but something shifted. A job loss, a medical emergency, a divorce, a pandemic, an economic recession. Life has a way of changing our financial landscapes, often when we least expect it. The thing about financial anxiety is that it doesn't discriminate. You might think it only affects people who are struggling to make ends meet, people living paycheck to paycheck or drowning in debt. And yes, those situations absolutely create intense financial anxiety. But here's what's fascinating and a little bit heartbreaking. Financial anxiety affects people across the entire economic spectrum. Millionaires lie awake at night worrying about money. People with stable jobs and healthy savings accounts still feel that knot of fear in their chest when they think about their finances. The anxiety might look different, the specific worries might vary, but that underlying current of fear and stress about money, it's remarkably universal. Let's think about why that is. What is it about money that has such a powerful grip on our psychological well-being? Money isn't just currency. It's never just been about the physical bills in your wallet or the numbers in your bank account. Money is symbolic. It represents security, freedom, status, power, success, worthiness. We've loaded money up with so much meaning that it's become almost impossible to think about it objectively. From the time we're children, we're learning messages about money, even when no one is explicitly teaching us. We watch how our parents react to bills. We notice when they argue about spending. We absorb their stress, their relief, their shame, their pride. If your parents clutched their purse tighter when passing a homeless person, you learned something about money and worth. If they spoke in hushed, worried tones about finances, you learned that money was something scary, something precarious. If they bought you everything you wanted without discussion, you might have learned that money was infinite, which created its own problems later when you discovered it very much was not. These early experiences shape what psychologists call our money scripts, the unconscious beliefs we hold about money that drive our financial behaviors and emotional responses. Some of us internalize the belief that money is inherently corrupting, that wealthy people are somehow morally suspect. Others absorb the message that money equals love, that being provided for financially is the primary way care is demonstrated. Still others learned that money is always scarce, that there will never be enough, so we must hoard and protect every penny. These money scripts run in the background of our minds, influencing decisions we think we're making rationally. You might sabotage your own financial success because deep down you believe you don't deserve wealth. You might spend compulsively because somewhere in your psyche you equate purchasing with self-care or happiness. You might avoid looking at your finances altogether because the shame and fear are too overwhelming, which of course only makes the situation worse. Financial anxiety often stems from this disconnect between our money scripts and our current reality. Maybe you grew up with the script that says money is security, but now you're facing uncertainty in your income. That script is being violated, and your nervous system responds with anxiety. Or perhaps you internalized talking about money is vulgar, but now you desperately need to discuss your financial situation with someone. The internal conflict alone can generate significant stress. There's also the very real phenomenon of financial trauma. Yes, trauma. We usually think of trauma in the context of physical danger or emotional abuse, but financial crises can absolutely be traumatic. Losing your home to foreclosure, declaring bankruptcy, experiencing sudden poverty after a job loss, watching your retirement savings evaporate in a market crash. These events can create lasting psychological wounds that affect how you relate to money for years or even decades afterward. Financial trauma can manifest as hypervigilance around spending, an inability to enjoy money even when you have it, panic attacks triggered by financial conversations, or complete avoidance of anything money-related. It can create a learned helplessness where you stop believing your actions can improve your financial situation. Understanding this as trauma rather than personal failure is actually really important because it opens up the possibility of healing rather than just self-criticism. Let's talk about the physical experience of financial anxiety because it's not just in your head. When you're worried about money, your body responds as if you're facing a physical threat. Your amygdala, that ancient part of your brain responsible for detecting danger, doesn't distinguish between a tiger chasing you and a collection notice in your mailbox. Both trigger the same stress response. Your body releases cortisol and adrenaline. Your heart rate increases. Your blood pressure rises. Your digestion slows down because your body is prioritizing immediate survival over long-term processes. In short bursts, this stress response is actually helpful. It focuses your attention, gives you energy to deal with the threat. But when financial stress is chronic, when it's day after day, week after week, month after month, this stress response becomes damaging. Chronic financial stress is linked to a whole host of health problems: cardiovascular disease, diabetes, weakened immune function, chronic pain, digestive issues, depression and anxiety disorders, sleep disturbances, which is probably why you're here listening to this right now. The relationship between financial stress and poor health creates a vicious cycle because health problems often create more financial stress, which exacerbates health problems, and around it goes. Sleep specifically is deeply affected by financial anxiety. Your brain is supposed to use sleep time to consolidate memories, clear out metabolic waste, restore your body's systems. But when you're anxious about money, your brain stays partially alert, scanning for threats even while you sleep. You might have racing thoughts that keep you awake. You might wake frequently, checking your phone, running calculations in your head. Even if you do sleep, the quality is poor because your nervous system never fully relaxes. Poor sleep then impairs your decision-making abilities, which can lead to worse financial choices, which increases anxiety, which disrupts sleep further. See the pattern? It's these interconnected cycles that make financial anxiety so particularly insidious. It's not just one problem, it's a cascade of problems that feed into each other. Now, let's dig into some of the specific psychological mechanisms that underlie financial anxiety. One of the most fundamental is uncertainty intolerance. Human beings generally don't like uncertainty. Our brains are prediction machines, constantly trying to anticipate what's going to happen next so we can prepare appropriately. Money is inherently uncertain, though. You don't know for sure what your income will be next year. You can't predict unexpected expenses, the economy, the job market, inflation. All of it involves variables you can't fully control. For people with low tolerance for uncertainty, this is incredibly distressing. They need to know, need to have guarantees, need to eliminate every possible variable. But that's impossible with finances, so they stay in a constant state of anxiety, always trying to achieve a certainty that will never come. Learning to tolerate uncertainty, to be okay with not knowing exactly how things will unfold, is actually one of the most powerful interventions for financial anxiety. Another key mechanism is catastrophic thinking. This is when your mind jumps immediately to worst-case scenarios. You miss a payment, and your brain tells you you're going to lose your home, end up on the streets, never recover. Now, consequences do exist for financial missteps, but catastrophic thinking skips over all the intermediate steps and possibilities and lands you directly in disaster. This kind of thinking naturally generates intense anxiety because you're essentially living in the worst possible future rather than the actual present. Catastrophic thinking often pairs with something called probability neglect. Your brain focuses on the possibility of a bad outcome without accurately assessing how likely that outcome actually is. Yes, it's possible you could lose your job tomorrow, but what's the actual probability based on your performance, your company's stability, your field's job market? Anxiety makes us treat low probability events as if they're inevitable, which keeps us in a state of perpetual fear. There's also the psychological weight of cognitive load. When you're financially stressed, part of your working memory is constantly occupied with financial concerns. It's like having several browser tabs open in your mind at all times, all of them playing videos about your financial problems. This leaves less cognitive capacity for everything else. You become forgetful, have trouble concentrating, struggle with tasks that should be simple. Then you criticize yourself for being unfocused or incompetent, not realizing that your brain is just overloaded. Studies have actually shown that financial stress can temporarily lower cognitive function to a degree similar to losing a full night's sleep or having a significant drop in IQ points. You're not stupid or lazy. Your brain is just doing too much, processing too much fear and uncertainty, and it's affecting your overall functioning. Let's consider the role of comparison in financial anxiety. Social comparison is a normal human process. We look at others to gauge where we stand, to understand what's possible, to find our place in the social hierarchy. But in our current age of social media, comparison has become toxic. You're not just comparing yourself to your neighbors or coworkers anymore. You're comparing yourself to carefully curated highlight reels of thousands of people's lives. Everyone appears to be going on expensive vacations, buying beautiful homes, wearing designer clothes, eating at trendy restaurants. Intellectually, you might know these are curated images, that they don't represent full financial realities, but emotionally, the impact is still there. You feel like you're falling behind, like everyone else has figured out something you haven't, like your financial situation is uniquely bad. This comparison triggers feelings of shame, inadequacy, and fear of missing out. You might overspend to keep up, diving into debt to maintain an appearance of prosperity, or you might withdraw, avoiding social situations altogether because you can't afford to participate in the lifestyle your peers seem to have. Either way, the comparison is feeding your financial anxiety, making you feel worse about your situation than the objective facts warrant. Shame deserves its own extended discussion because shame is perhaps the most painful emotion connected to financial anxiety. Shame isn't just feeling bad about something you did. Shame is feeling bad about who you are, believing that you are fundamentally flawed or worthless. Financial shame tells you that your financial situation reflects your value as a person, that struggling with money means you're a failure, that you should be able to handle this better, that others would judge you harshly if they knew the truth. Shame is isolating. It makes you hide your struggles, put on a facade, pretend everything is fine when it's falling apart. And that isolation makes everything worse because you're dealing with your financial anxiety completely alone, without support, without perspective, without the relief that comes from realizing others face similar challenges. Financial shame is often gendered in interesting ways. Men may feel shame about not being providers, about failing to live up to cultural expectations of masculinity that tie worth to earning capacity. Women may feel shame about not being fiscally responsible enough, or conversely, about being too focused on money rather than relationships. Non-binary folks may face shame from multiple directions, never quite fitting the financial scripts society offers. Cultural and familial backgrounds also shape financial shame. If you came from a culture that highly values financial success and stability, falling short of that ideal can feel like betraying your family, your community, your heritage. If you were raised with the message that struggling financially is a sign of moral failure, your financial difficulties become not just a practical problem, but an existential one. Breaking shame requires vulnerability, which is terrifying when you're already feeling fragile. But shame cannot survive being spoken. When you share your financial struggles with someone who responds with empathy rather than judgment, shame begins to lose its power. You realize you're not uniquely broken, you're just human, navigating a genuinely difficult aspect of life that many people struggle with. Let's shift to talking about the paradox of financial avoidance. Logic would suggest that if you're anxious about money, you'd be hypervigilant, constantly checking your accounts, meticulously tracking every penny. Some people do respond that way. But a significant number of people respond to financial anxiety with complete avoidance. They don't open bills, don't check their bank balance, don't look at credit card statements, don't file taxes until the last possible moment, or sometimes not at all. This isn't laziness or irresponsibility, though that's often how it's judged, both by others and by the person themselves. Avoidance is a coping mechanism, an attempt to manage overwhelming anxiety by eliminating the trigger. If you don't look, you don't have to face the reality that scares you. The problem, of course, is that avoiding financial information doesn't make financial problems disappear. It usually makes them worse. Fees accumulate, interest compounds, opportunities are missed. Situations that could have been managed spiral out of control. But understanding avoidance as an anxiety response, rather than a character flaw, is crucial. It means the solution isn't just be more responsible, but rather addressing the underlying anxiety that makes financial engagement feel unbearable. It means creating systems that reduce the emotional intensity of financial tasks, building tolerance gradually, and being compassionate with yourself about why avoidance has been your strategy. There's a related concept called financial denial, where you're not necessarily avoiding looking at your finances, but you're minimizing or distorting what you see. You tell yourself it's not that bad, that you'll definitely have more income next month, that you can always dip into savings if needed, even when the evidence suggests otherwise. This is your psyche protecting you from a truth that feels too threatening to fully acknowledge. Denial provides temporary relief, but prevents you from taking necessary action. It's like having a leak in your roof and telling yourself it's just a small drip, nothing to worry about, while the water damage spreads through your ceiling. Part of addressing financial anxiety is learning to tolerate reality, even when it's uncomfortable, because only then can you make effective changes. Money and identity are deeply intertwined, more than we often realize. Your financial situation affects how you see yourself, your sense of competence, your feeling of being a successful adult. When finances are unstable, it can shake your entire sense of self. Who are you if you can't pay your bills? What does it mean about you if you're in debt? How can you respect yourself when you keep making what you perceive as financial mistakes? These identity questions add another layer to financial anxiety. It's not just worry about practical consequences, it's existential distress about what your financial situation means about your worth, your intelligence, your capability. And because identity is so core to our psychological well-being, threats to identity generate particularly intense emotional responses. Career anxiety is often intimately connected to financial anxiety. Your job is typically your primary income source, so anything that threatens job security naturally creates financial worry. But beyond that, many people tie their sense of purpose and value to their work. Losing a job or being underemployed doesn't just mean less money, it means loss of structure, social connection, identity, and sense of contributing meaningfully to the world. The modern employment landscape, with its emphasis on contract work, gig economy, and reduced job security, has made career anxiety more prevalent. You can't count on staying with one company for your whole career. Pensions are rare, benefits are uncertain. You're supposed to be constantly networking, upskilling, side hustling, building your personal brand. It's exhausting, and it creates a background level of financial uncertainty that previous generations didn't face to the same degree. Parenting while financially anxious adds yet another dimension. You worry about providing for your children, giving them opportunities, not passing on your financial stress. You feel guilty when you can't buy them things their friends have. You might overextend yourself financially, trying to make sure they don't feel deprived. Or you might be so restrictive about money that they grow up feeling the same scarcity mindset that causes you anxiety. There's also the challenge of talking to children about money when you're anxious about it yourself. You want to teach them healthy financial habits, but you might not feel like you've mastered those yourself. You want to be honest without burdening them with adult worries. It's a delicate balance, and financial anxiety makes it harder to strike. Socioeconomic factors play a huge role in financial anxiety that we need to acknowledge directly. If you're living in poverty or near poverty, financial anxiety isn't irrational or disproportionate. It's a realistic response to genuine threat. When you're one emergency away from homelessness, when you're choosing between food and medication, when you're working multiple jobs and still can't make ends meet, anxiety is the appropriate response. The psychological toll of poverty is enormous. The constant stress, the lack of control, the daily indignities, the way systems seem designed to keep you down rather than help you up. Poverty creates a cognitive and emotional burden that makes it harder to make optimal decisions, which can then be judged as poor choices rather than recognized as the impact of chronic stress on the brain. Systemic factors like wage stagnation, rising costs of living, education and healthcare expenses, lack of affordable housing, all contribute to financial anxiety across the board, but hit lower-income individuals hardest. Individual psychological interventions can help, but we also need to acknowledge that much financial anxiety is a rational response to unjust economic structures. For middle-class individuals, there's often this fear of falling, of losing the security they've managed to achieve. Housing costs consume a larger portion of income than ever before. Healthcare is expensive even with insurance. Education costs are astronomical. The middle class is squeezed, and many people feel like they're one major setback away from serious financial trouble. This isn't paranoia. For many families, it's accurate assessment. Even wealthy individuals experience financial anxiety, though it manifests differently. There's anxiety about maintaining wealth, about making the right investments, about market volatility. There's fear about being taken advantage of, about not knowing who to trust. There's pressure to grow wealth continuously, never being satisfied with what they have. There can be intense guilt about having wealth while others suffer, or conversely, a fear that others resent them for their money. The point is that financial anxiety isn't simply about how much money you have, it's about your relationship with money, the meaning you've assigned to it, the fears and beliefs you hold, the systems you're operating within. Understanding this helps us move away from the simplistic idea that financial anxiety would disappear if you just made more money. Sometimes more money helps tremendously, absolutely, but without addressing the underlying psychological patterns, people often find that no amount of money feels like enough. Retirement anxiety is another significant component of financial stress for many people. The responsibility for retirement has largely shifted from employers and government programs to individuals. You're supposed to save enough, invest wisely, predict your future needs across potentially decades of retirement. For younger people, retirement feels impossibly far away, so saving for it competes with immediate needs and debts. For older people, retirement looms large, and many realize they haven't saved nearly enough. The calculations are overwhelming. How much do you need? It depends on inflation rates you can't predict, healthcare costs that seem to only go up, how long you'll live, whether Social Security will still exist in its current form, whether you'll face major, unexpected expenses. Financial advisors throw out numbers like needing $1 million or more to retire comfortably, which feels completely unattainable for many people. So they live with this low-grade dread about their future, about becoming a burden, about working until they literally can't anymore. Debt has its own special psychological weight. Being in debt can feel like carrying actual physical weight around. It affects how you move through the world, the decisions you make, the opportunities you can pursue. Different types of debt carry different emotional loads. Mortgage debt is often seen as good debt, an investment in your future. Student loan debt might feel more ambivalent, representing education and opportunity, but also burden and regret about choices made when you were young. Credit card debt often carries the most shame because it's associated with spending beyond your means, with a perceived lack of discipline. But here's what's important to understand. Being in debt doesn't make you a bad person. The lending industry is specifically designed to make debt easy to acquire and difficult to escape. Interest rates, minimum payments, revolving credit, buy now, pay later schemes, all of it is calculated to maximize profit for lenders, not to serve your best interests. Yes, individual choices matter, but those choices happen within a larger economic system that profits from your debt. The psychological burden of debt goes beyond the actual dollar amount. It's the mental bandwidth it occupies, the constant calculations of what you can afford, the anxiety about making payments, the limitation on your future choices. Debt can make you feel trapped, like you're running on a treadmill and no matter how hard you work, you're not getting anywhere. This feeling of futility can lead to hopelessness, which is a short step away from depression. Let's talk about the relationship between financial anxiety and relationships. Money is one of the top sources of conflict in romantic partnerships. Different spending habits, different values around money, different levels of financial literacy, different income levels, all of it can create tension. When you're already anxious about finances, that anxiety often spills over into your relationships. You might pick fights about spending decisions as a way to express your underlying fear. You might withdraw from your partner, hiding purchases or debts because you're ashamed or afraid of judgment. You might project your financial fears onto them, criticizing their work or income when you're really worried about your own. Financial infidelity, hiding financial information from a partner, is surprisingly common and often rooted in shame and anxiety rather than malicious intent. For people who are single, financial anxiety can affect dating and social life. There's pressure to spend money to attract partners, to go on dates that strain your budget, to present a lifestyle you can't really afford. Or you might avoid dating altogether, feeling like you're not financially stable enough to be worthy of partnership. Financial anxiety can literally keep you from pursuing human connection, which is one of the most important factors in overall well-being. Let's explore the concept of financial scarcity mindset versus abundance mindset, but with some nuance because these terms can be weaponized in unhelpful ways. A scarcity mindset views resources as limited, focuses on what you don't have, and approaches financial decisions from a place of fear and protection. An abundance mindset sees opportunity, believes resources can be created or expanded, and approaches financial decisions from possibility rather than fear. Now, here's where it gets tricky. Some financial gurus will tell you that all you need to do is shift your mindset from scarcity to abundance and money will flow to you. This is magical thinking that ignores real economic constraints and structural inequalities. If you're living paycheck to paycheck, adopting an abundance mindset doesn't magically create more money. Telling someone in genuine scarcity that they just need to think more positively is insulting and dismissive. However, there is something useful in examining how scarcity mindset, even when it originated from real scarcity, can persist and create patterns that no longer serve you. If you grew up with very little, you might have internalized the belief that money is always scarce, that you must hold tight to every penny, that spending anything is dangerous. These patterns might have been protective and necessary then, but if your circumstances have changed and you're now in a more stable position, that scarcity mindset might be preventing you from opportunities, keeping you in chronic stress even when the objective threat has decreased. The shift isn't about pretending money isn't real or that you can just wish your way to wealth. It's about examining your beliefs, recognizing which ones are based on current reality versus old programming, and consciously choosing which patterns you want to maintain. It's about expanding your sense of possibility within the constraints that exist, finding agency in a situation that may have felt completely determined. Financial anxiety is often future-focused. You're not usually anxious about money you have right now, in this moment. You're anxious about future money, future expenses, future uncertainties. Your mind is living in a projected future, running scenarios, most of them negative. This means you're rarely present, rarely experiencing the actual current moment, which might be okay or even good. There's a practice in mindfulness traditions of asking, am I okay right now, in this moment? Not, will I be okay next month, or was I okay yesterday? But right now, in this breath, in this moment, am I okay? Often, the answer is yes. You're breathing, you're safe, you have what you need in this present moment. The anxiety is about time that hasn't happened yet, situations that may never occur. This isn't to dismiss future planning or suggest you ignore real upcoming challenges, but there's a difference between productive planning and anxious rumination. Planning involves assessing the situation, identifying possible actions, making decisions, and then taking those actions. Rumination involves cycling through the same worries over and over without reaching any resolution, just generating more anxiety. Learning to anchor yourself in present reality to distinguish between productive concern and unproductive worry can significantly reduce the emotional intensity of financial anxiety. When you catch yourself spiraling into future catastrophes, you can pause and ask, what is required of me in this actual moment? Often, it's something much simpler than the elaborate disaster scenarios your anxiety is painting. Financial grief is a real phenomenon that doesn't get talked about enough. When you lose financial security, whether through job loss, business failure, economic crisis, or other circumstances, you may grieve that loss similarly to how you'd grieve other significant losses. You're mourning the future you thought you'd have, the stability you counted on, the identity you held, the opportunities that now seem closed off. Grief has stages: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance. You might find yourself moving through these in relation to your financial situation, denying the severity of your circumstances, getting angry at yourself or others or the system, bargaining with yourself about what you could have done differently, falling into depression about your situation, and eventually, hopefully, reaching some acceptance of where you are so you can move forward. Allowing yourself to grieve financial loss rather than just immediately trying to fix it or berating yourself can actually be healing. It acknowledges the real impact of what you've experienced, gives yourself permission to feel the natural emotions that arise, and creates space for eventually moving through and beyond the loss. Financial comparison doesn't just happen with peers, it happens across generations too. You might compare your financial situation to where your parents were at your age, forgetting that the economic landscape has shifted dramatically. Housing was more affordable for many boomers. Education didn't leave people with crushing debt. Single-income households could often support families. The economic rules have changed, but the comparisons persist, making you feel like a failure for not achieving what previous generations could with less effort. Younger generations face challenges their parents didn't: student loan debt, gig economy precarity, climate change, economic impacts, rising costs that have far outpaced wage growth. Recognizing these structural differences doesn't excuse personal responsibility, but it does provide important context. You're not failing to launch or achieve milestones because you're lazy or incompetent. You're navigating a genuinely more difficult economic environment in many ways. Conversely, older generations might feel financial anxiety about not having prepared adequately for retirement, about being from a generation that didn't emphasize financial literacy, about seeing their children struggle and wanting to help but not having the resources. They might feel guilt about the economic and environmental legacy they're leaving. Financial anxiety isn't confined to any single generation, though. It manifests differently depending on life stage and historical context. The role of financial literacy in financial anxiety is complex. On one hand, lack of financial knowledge can absolutely contribute to anxiety. If you don't understand how credit works, how to budget, how investments function, the basics of taxes and insurance, you're navigating finances essentially blind, and that uncertainty breeds anxiety. Financial education can provide tools and understanding that reduce fear and improve outcomes. On the other hand, financial literacy is often presented as the solution to all financial woes, which is both inaccurate and places undue burden on individuals. You can be financially literate and still face enormous challenges if your income is inadequate or your circumstances are difficult. Moreover, the financial literacy industry sometimes obscures systemic problems by suggesting that if everyone just educated themselves better, everything would be fine, which ignores inequality, exploitation, and structural economic issues. The sweet spot is recognizing that financial literacy is helpful and empowering, while also acknowledging its limitations. Learning about money can reduce some anxiety by increasing your sense of control and capability. But it's not a magic bullet, and lacking financial knowledge doesn't make your struggles your fault. The system should be more transparent, more fair, more accessible. While working within it, though, understanding it better generally helps. Imposter syndrome shows up in financial contexts too. You might feel like you don't deserve the money you earn, that you're somehow fooling people, that eventually you'll be found out as incompetent and everything will collapse. This is especially common among high achievers and people from marginalized groups who face stereotypes suggesting they're less capable. Financial imposter syndrome creates anxiety because you're always waiting for the other shoe to drop, for your perceived fraud to be exposed. It can prevent you from negotiating for higher pay, pursuing promotions, or investing in yourself because deep down you don't believe you're worth it. It can also lead to overwork and burnout as you try to prove your worth, never feeling like you're doing enough. Recognizing imposter syndrome for what it is, a psychological pattern rather than reality, can help. Your skills are real. Your accomplishments are earned. The anxiety is the imposter, not you. This doesn't make the feelings disappear immediately, but it can help you make decisions based on reality rather than the distorted mirror imposter syndrome holds up. Financial boundaries are another crucial aspect of managing financial anxiety. Boundaries with family who ask for money you don't have or can't afford to give. Boundaries with yourself about impulsive spending. Boundaries with friends about social activities beyond your budget. Boundaries with employers about compensation and workload. Setting and maintaining these boundaries is hard, especially when you're anxious and maybe wanting to please others or avoid conflict. But without boundaries, you end up overextended, resentful, and often in worse financial shape, which increases anxiety. Learning to say no, to communicate your limits, to prioritize your own financial health, these are skills that directly impact your financial well-being and reduce anxiety. It feels uncomfortable, especially at first, but the long-term relief is worth the short-term discomfort. The connection between financial anxiety and perfectionism deserves attention. Perfectionists often struggle intensely with finances because they set impossible standards, beat themselves up for any perceived mistake, and feel overwhelming shame when they fall short of their ideals. Your budget might be perfect on paper, but the first time you overspend, even slightly, you abandon the whole thing because it's ruined. It's not perfect anymore, so what's the point? This all-or-nothing thinking creates a cycle where you're either rigidly controlling every penny or completely giving up and avoiding everything. Neither extreme is sustainable or healthy. Financial management, like life in general, requires flexibility, adaptation, forgiveness for mistakes, and incremental progress rather than perfection. Perfectionism is often rooted in fear, the belief that if you're perfect, you can avoid criticism, failure, or abandonment. But perfection is impossible, so you're always falling short, always feeding the anxiety. Learning to accept good enough to make progress without demanding perfection is tremendously liberating and actually more effective for achieving your goals. Seasonal financial anxiety is a real pattern for many people. The holidays often bring financial stress, with pressure to buy gifts, host gatherings, participate in expensive traditions. Back-to-school time can strain budgets with clothing, supplies, fees. Tax season brings its own anxiety, especially if you owe money or struggle with the paperwork. Even summer can be financially stressful, with kids out of school requiring childcare or camps, with vacation expectations, with higher utility bills. Recognizing these seasonal patterns helps you prepare and cope. If you know December is always tough, you can plan for it earlier in the year, set realistic expectations, and develop strategies that reduce the stress. Understanding that your anxiety intensifies at predictable times also helps you not catastrophize it as a permanent state or personal failing. Weather and natural disasters add another layer to financial anxiety for many people. If you live in an area prone to hurricanes, wildfires, floods, or earthquakes, there's the anxiety of potential massive financial loss. Even if you have insurance, which many people don't or can't afford, there's still deductibles, displaced living expenses, lost work time, and the possibility that your insurance won't cover everything. Climate change is making these anxieties more prevalent and more justified. Areas that were once safe are now at risk. Insurance companies are pulling out of some markets or raising rates to unaffordable levels. The financial implications of our changing climate are enormous and anxiety-inducing on both individual and collective levels. Financial anxiety intersects with health anxiety in bi-directional ways. Health problems create financial stress through medical bills, lost work time, ongoing treatment costs. Financial stress creates health problems through chronic stress, inability to afford preventative care, delayed treatment of conditions, and unhealthy coping mechanisms. The American healthcare system, in particular, is a significant source of financial anxiety. Even with insurance, costs can be devastating. Medical debt is a leading cause of bankruptcy. People ration medications, skip necessary procedures, avoid seeing doctors because they can't afford it. The anxiety about potential health problems is compounded by anxiety about the financial consequences of those problems. This creates impossible situations where you're anxious about your health, anxious about the cost of addressing your health, and caught in a bind that perpetuates suffering. For people with chronic conditions or disabilities, this is a daily reality, a constant calculation of what care they can afford, what symptoms they can ignore, what risks they're willing to take to avoid financial ruin. Financial anxiety shows up differently depending on personality type and mental health factors. People with existing anxiety disorders may find that financial stress particularly exacerbates their symptoms, triggering panic attacks or obsessive thought patterns. Depression can make financial management feel overwhelming, sapping the energy and motivation needed to address problems. ADHD can make budgeting and financial planning genuinely more difficult, not from lack of caring, but from executive function challenges. Recognizing how your particular brain works, what your specific vulnerabilities are, helps you develop strategies that actually work for you, rather than trying to force yourself into someone else's system. Maybe you need accountability partners because you struggle with follow-through. Maybe you need to automate as much as possible because decision-making drains you. Maybe you need visual systems rather than spreadsheets. Adapting to your actual brain rather than the brain you think you should have makes everything easier. Trauma responses also show up in financial behavior. Fight responses might manifest as aggressive pursuit of money, workaholism, or fighting with partners about finances. Flight responses might look like avoidance, literally running from financial responsibilities. Freeze responses can create paralysis, an inability to make any financial decisions at all. Fawn responses might involve people-pleasing through money, giving to others even when you can't afford it, trying to buy love or approval. Understanding these as trauma responses rather than character flaws opens up possibilities for healing. You can develop compassion for why you respond the way you do, while still working to change patterns that aren't serving you. Therapy, particularly trauma-informed therapy, can be incredibly helpful for addressing the roots of financial anxiety that stem from earlier experiences. The intersection of financial anxiety and substance use is significant and often overlooked. Some people use alcohol, drugs, or other substances to cope with the stress and fear around money. This provides temporary relief, but ultimately makes everything worse, creating new problems, new expenses, and new sources of shame. Other people find that their substance use issues create financial problems, and the spiral of trying to fund a habit while managing consequences feeds intense anxiety. Shopping and spending can also function as a coping mechanism, a way to feel better temporarily, to fill an emotional void, to experience a hit of dopamine. Compulsive spending disorder is a real condition where the urge to shop becomes overwhelming and destructive. Understanding whether your spending is truly compulsive or just a coping strategy helps determine what kind of help you need. Food is another area where financial anxiety and coping intersect. Stress eating, binge eating, or conversely, restricting food to save money all reflect the complex relationship between financial stress and our basic needs. Food insecurity, genuinely not knowing where your next meal will come from, creates profound anxiety and has lasting psychological effects. Financial anxiety in the context of major life transitions is particularly acute. Starting a career, getting married or divorced, having children, caring for aging parents, retiring, dealing with the death of a loved one, all of these transitions have significant financial components that can spike anxiety. You're already dealing with emotional upheaval and uncertainty, and adding financial stress to that creates a particularly volatile situation. Planning for transitions when possible can help. building financial cushions before starting a family, having difficult conversations about money before marriage, understanding the financial implications of divorce or caregiving responsibilities. These proactive steps can reduce some anxiety. But life doesn't always allow for planning, and sometimes you're thrown into transitions without preparation. Being gentle with yourself during these times is crucial. Cultural messages about money are everywhere and often contradictory, which contributes to financial anxiety. You're supposed to save for the future, but also live in the moment. You're supposed to be financially responsible, but also generous. You're supposed to work hard and earn money, but also not be too materialistic. These contradictory messages create internal conflict about what the right way to handle money is. Different cultures have different values around money. Some emphasize collective wealth and sharing resources. Others emphasize individual achievement and accumulation. Some view discussing money as taboo. Others are very open about financial matters. Navigating your own relationship with money means sorting through these cultural messages, deciding what resonates with you, what you want to keep, and what you want to reject. Gender and money is another complex intersection. Women often face wage gaps, career penalties from motherhood, and social conditioning that discourages financial assertiveness. Men face pressure to be providers and may tie their worth to earning capacity. Non-binary and transgender individuals may face employment discrimination and additional economic challenges. Understanding how gender influences your financial experience and anxiety can help you recognize what's personal versus structural. Aging and financial anxiety evolve together. Young adults might be anxious about student loans and starting their careers. People in their 30s and 40s might worry about home ownership, raising children, and saving for retirement while managing current expenses. Those in their 50s and 60s face the reality of retirement approaching and may panic about whether they've saved enough. Retirees worry about making their money last, about healthcare costs, about losing independence. Each life stage has its particular financial anxieties, and recognizing what's normal versus what's excessive can provide some perspective. It's normal to worry about money when you're starting out and don't earn much yet. It's normal to feel stretched when you're raising kids. It's normal to be concerned about retirement. The question is whether that normal concern has tipped into anxiety that's impacting your quality of life and functioning. Technology has changed our relationship with money in ways that affect anxiety. On one hand, apps and tools make managing money easier. You can check your balance anytime, transfer funds instantly, track spending automatically. This can reduce anxiety by increasing information and control. On the other hand, constant access means you can obsessively check your accounts, compare yourself to others on social media, make impulsive purchases with a few taps, and receive constant notifications about your finances. The gamification of investing, cryptocurrency volatility, the rise of buy now, pay later schemes, all of these technological developments create new sources of financial anxiety. The stock market used to be something most people checked occasionally in the newspaper. Now you can watch your investments fluctuate in real time, which can drive obsessive checking and panic selling. Finding a healthy relationship with financial technology means using tools that help while avoiding patterns that feed anxiety. Financial anxiety and creativity might seem unrelated, but financial stress actually impacts creative capacity. When your brain is consumed with survival concerns, there's less room for the kind of expansive thinking that creativity requires. Artists, writers, musicians, and other creative professionals often face particular financial anxiety because their income may be unpredictable, they're told their work isn't valuable, and they're navigating industries with limited stability. There's also the challenge of investing in creative pursuits when money is tight. Do you spend money on art supplies, music equipment, writing courses when you're struggling to pay bills? The internal battle between practical survival and creative expression can create significant anxiety. Yet, creative expression is also often crucial for mental health and processing emotions, including financial anxiety. Financial abuse is a serious issue that creates intense financial anxiety. A partner who controls all the money, prevents you from working, runs up debt in your name, or monitors and criticizes every purchase is using financial control as a tool of abuse. Leaving such situations is incredibly difficult, partly because of the financial dependence and uncertainty involved. Rebuilding after financial abuse requires not just practical rebuilding of finances, but also healing from the trauma. Family financial abuse can involve parents stealing from children, adult children exploiting elderly parents, or relatives pressuring you for money through manipulation and guilt. Recognizing these patterns as abuse rather than just complicated family dynamics is important for protecting yourself and finding appropriate resources and support. Philosophical questions about money and meaning often underlie financial anxiety. What is money for? What's the point of earning it, saving it, spending it? If you haven't consciously explored your values around money, you might be following scripts that don't align with what actually matters to you, creating dissonance and anxiety. Some people value security above all else, so their financial decisions prioritize safety and stability. Others value experience and adventure, so they're more comfortable taking risks and spending on travel or novelty. Neither approach is wrong, but problems arise when you're trying to live according to someone else's values, or when you haven't articulated what you actually care about. Defining enough is another philosophical challenge. How much is enough? When can you stop striving and start enjoying? Without answering this question for yourself, you may chase financial goals endlessly, always anxious because there's always more you could have, never experiencing the peace of sufficiency. Financial anxiety during economic downturns and recessions intensifies across entire populations. The 2008 financial crisis, the COVID-19 economic disruption, these events created or exacerbated financial anxiety for millions. Even people who didn't lose jobs or homes experienced increased anxiety watching others suffer, feeling the instability, questioning their own security. Collective trauma from economic catastrophes can shape entire generations' relationships with money. People who lived through the Great Depression carried Depression-era attitudes about money for the rest of their lives. Millennials who entered the job market during the 2008 financial crisis have been economically scarred in ways that affect their financial behaviors and anxieties. Gen Z, facing climate change and economic uncertainty, is developing its own particular form of financial anxiety. Understanding your financial anxiety in the context of larger economic forces helps you recognize what's personal versus what's structural. Yes, individual choices matter. Yes, there are things within your control, but you're also operating within systems that are genuinely challenging, sometimes unjust, often designed in ways that benefit some at the expense of others. Acknowledging this doesn't mean giving up agency. It means having a realistic view of the terrain you're navigating. Financial anxiety and spirituality might seem like odd companions, but many spiritual and religious traditions have teachings about money that affect how people relate to it. Some traditions emphasize poverty or simplicity as spiritual virtues, creating conflict if you're pursuing financial security. Others embrace prosperity as a sign of blessing, creating anxiety if you're struggling financially because it might mean you're spiritually deficient. Wrestling with these spiritual and religious messages about money is part of many people's financial anxiety. How do you reconcile practical needs with spiritual values? How do you think about wealth and generosity and stewardship in ways that feel authentic? There's no universal answer, but exploring these questions can help clarify your relationship with money beyond just practical management. Some people find that their spiritual or religious community provides support during financial difficulty, both practical help and emotional comfort. Others find that their community's attitudes about money increase shame and isolation. The intersection of faith and finances is deeply personal and can be either a source of solace or additional stress. Financial milestones that you haven't reached can be a significant source of anxiety, especially when there's an expected timeline. Not owning a home by a certain age, not earning a certain salary, not having retirement savings, not being debt-free, whatever milestones you've internalized as markers of success. Missing these milestones can feel like failure, creating anxiety about being behind, about never catching up. But whose timeline is this anyway? Who decided these milestones and their timing? Often they're based on previous economic conditions that no longer exist, or on someone else's path that doesn't fit your life. Rejecting arbitrary timelines and defining success on your own terms can significantly reduce this type of anxiety. Your journey is yours. Comparison timelines are usually meaningless. Financial anxiety can manifest as physical symptoms that you might not initially connect to money stress. Headaches, stomach aches, muscle tension, chest pain, difficulty breathing, all can be physical manifestations of financial anxiety. Sometimes people seek medical treatment for these symptoms without realizing the root cause is financial stress. Recognizing the connection doesn't make the symptoms less real, but it does point toward addressing the anxiety as part of treatment. The mind-body connection in financial anxiety is powerful. Your thoughts about money trigger emotional responses, which trigger physical responses, which then trigger more anxious thoughts, creating a self-perpetuating cycle. Breaking this cycle might mean addressing it at any point, challenging the thoughts, processing the emotions, or working with the physical symptoms through relaxation techniques, exercise, or other body-based interventions. Sleep, which we touched on earlier, deserves more attention because it's so crucial and so affected by financial anxiety. When you can't sleep because you're worried about money, you might lie there calculating, planning, worrying, or just feeling a generalized dread. The harder you try to sleep, the more elusive it becomes because now you're anxious about being anxious about money and also not sleeping. Developing a sleep routine that creates some separation from financial worries can help. Maybe that's a worry time earlier in the evening where you let yourself think about finances, write down concerns, make a plan if possible, and then mentally close that door for the night. Maybe it's relaxation techniques, meditation, gentle movement, reading, whatever helps signal to your brain that it's time to shift gears. Understanding that your financial situation won't change while you sleep can help give yourself permission to rest. The exhaustion from chronic financial anxiety is real and debilitating. It's not just feeling tired, it's a bone-deep weariness from carrying stress day after day, from constantly being vigilant, from never fully relaxing. This exhaustion affects everything: your work performance, your relationships, your health, your ability to make good decisions, your overall quality of life. rest becomes crucial but also feels impossible or indulgent. How can you rest when there are financial problems to solve? But functioning on empty makes you less effective at solving those problems. Finding ways to rest, truly rest, even in the midst of financial difficulty, is an act of survival and self-compassion, not laziness or avoidance. Community and connection are powerful antidotes to financial anxiety, though anxiety often drives us toward isolation. Talking with others who understand, who have faced similar struggles, who won't judge you, this can provide immense relief. Not necessarily practical solutions, though sometimes those emerge too, but the relief of being known, being seen, not being alone in the struggle. This is part of why that Discord community I mentioned at the beginning is so valuable. It's a space where people can be honest about their financial fears and challenges, where you can learn from others' experiences, where you can give and receive support. Money is such a taboo topic in many contexts, so having a space where it's okay to talk openly makes a real difference. Mutual aid, the practice of communities pooling resources and helping each other, offers both practical support and a counter-narrative to the hyper-individualism that intensifies financial anxiety. You're not supposed to handle everything alone. Humans are social creatures who've always survived through cooperation. Finding or creating mutual aid networks can reduce financial anxiety by spreading risk and providing safety nets that formal systems don't. Financial anxiety and activism might seem disconnected, but for some people, channeling financial frustration into working for systemic change actually reduces personal anxiety. Fighting for living wages, better labor protections, affordable healthcare and housing, student debt relief. These struggles acknowledge that financial anxiety isn't just individual failure, but a response to real structural problems. Working toward change can provide a sense of agency and purpose. That said, not everyone has the capacity for activism when they're drowning in financial anxiety. Survival takes precedence, and that's okay. Sometimes the most radical thing you can do is simply keep going. Keep caring for yourself and your loved ones. There's no moral obligation to turn your pain into a political movement, though it's wonderful when people choose to do so. Financial therapy is an emerging field that specifically addresses the psychological and emotional aspects of money. Traditional financial advisors focus on numbers, strategies, investments. Traditional therapists might not have specific expertise in financial issues. Financial therapists bridge this gap, helping people explore their emotional relationship with money, their money scripts and beliefs, their behavioral patterns, while also providing some financial education and guidance. For people whose financial anxiety is deeply rooted in psychological patterns, trauma, or relationship dynamics, financial therapy can be more effective than either financial advice or traditional therapy alone. It addresses the whole picture: the practical financial situation, the emotional responses, the behavioral patterns, the relational dynamics, all of it. Medication can play a role in managing financial anxiety, particularly when anxiety reaches the level of a disorder. Anti-anxiety medications, antidepressants, they can help reduce the intensity of symptoms enough that you can function, think clearly, and implement other coping strategies. Medication isn't right for everyone, and it's not a cure-all, but for some people, it's an important part of managing financial anxiety. There's often shame around needing medication for mental health, including anxiety. But if your financial anxiety is significantly impairing your life, medication might be a tool worth considering in consultation with the healthcare provider. It's not weakness, it's treating a legitimate medical condition that happens to be triggered by financial circumstances. Self-compassion is perhaps the most powerful tool for managing financial anxiety, and it's also one of the hardest to access when you're in the midst of stress. Self-compassion means treating yourself with the same kindness you'd offer a good friend, recognizing your common humanity rather than feeling isolated in your struggles, and maintaining balanced awareness of your situation rather than being overwhelmed by it. When you're financially anxious, you might default to harsh self-criticism. You berate yourself for mistakes, for not knowing better for your situation. This criticism doesn't help. It just adds emotional pain to an already difficult situation. Self-compassion doesn't mean letting yourself off the hook or avoiding responsibility. It means approaching yourself with kindness while still being honest about your situation and what needs to change. Practicing self-compassion might sound like, "This is really hard. A lot of people struggle with money. I'm doing the best I can with the knowledge and resources I have. I'm worthy of kindness, including from myself." It might mean noticing when you're being harsh with yourself and consciously softening that voice. It might mean treating yourself to small kindnesses, even when money is tight, reminding yourself that you matter beyond your bank balance. Financial anxiety often involves a lot of shoulding. I should have saved more. I should be earning more. I should be better at budgeting. I shouldn't have made that purchase. These shoulds are usually based on internalized expectations that may not even align with your values or reality. Questioning the shoulds, asking whether they're actually true or helpful, can reduce their power. Maybe you should have saved more, but you were dealing with the health crisis, or supporting a family member, or just surviving on low income. The should ignores context. Replacing should with could opens up possibility without the shame. I could save more acknowledges possibility without the judgment. I could learn about investing is inviting rather than condemning. Gratitude practices are often recommended for financial anxiety, and they can help, but they need to be approached carefully. Toxic positivity that dismisses real struggles with instructions to just be grateful isn't helpful, but genuinely noticing and appreciating what you do have, even in difficult circumstances, can provide some relief from constant focus on scarcity and fear. This might look like appreciating a meal you were able to afford, a friend who listens, a roof over your head, even if you're worried about next month's rent. It's not pretending problems don't exist. It's balancing awareness of difficulty with awareness of whatever good also exists. This balance can prevent financial anxiety from completely consuming your perspective. Finding meaning beyond money is crucial for managing financial anxiety in the long term. Money is important, genuinely important for survival and security and opportunity, but it's not the only thing that matters. Relationships, health, creativity, contribution, growth, joy, all of these have value that exists independently of your financial situation. People who have a strong sense of purpose and meaning that isn't tied primarily to money tend to be more resilient in the face of financial difficulty. They suffer, yes, but they don't lose their sense of self-worth or their reason for being. Cultivating meaning in your life, whatever that looks like for you, provides ballast against the storms of financial anxiety. This might mean investing time in relationships, pursuing creative expression, volunteering, learning, spiritual practice, time in nature, whatever fills you up in ways that money can't. These aren't luxuries to postpone until your finances are perfect. They're necessities for a full life and for maintaining the resilience you need to handle financial challenges. We're reaching the point in our conversation where things are winding down, where the topics circle back to themselves, where the themes we've explored interweave and reinforce each other. Financial anxiety is complex, multifaceted, deeply personal, and yet also universal. It touches on almost every aspect of human experience: our survival needs, our relationships, our identities, our hopes and fears, our past and future. Understanding financial anxiety as a psychological phenomenon rather than just a practical problem opens up new possibilities for addressing it. You're not broken or weak for experiencing financial anxiety. You're human, responding to real challenges with emotions that make sense given your experiences and the systems you're operating within. Healing from financial anxiety, or at least reducing it to manageable levels, is possible. It requires patience, self-compassion, sometimes professional help, often community support. It means addressing both the practical financial situation when you can and the emotional responses, whether you can change the practical situation or not. It means challenging beliefs and patterns that no longer serve you while being realistic about the constraints you face. Small steps matter more than grand gestures. Small moments of self-kindness, small shifts in perspective, small actions toward financial clarity. These accumulate over time into meaningful change. You don't have to transform everything overnight. In fact, you can't. Sustainable change is gradual, built through repeated small choices that eventually become new patterns. Remember that Discord community, the one where you can connect with others, where giveaways happen, where we're working together to support less privileged communities globally? That invitation stands. You don't have to face financial anxiety alone. There are people who understand, who won't judge, who can offer perspective and support, and sometimes practical help. Your financial situation doesn't define your worth. Your net worth is not your self-worth. Your bank balance doesn't measure your value as a human being. You are worthy of kindness, rest, joy, and support, regardless of your financial circumstances. This can be hard to believe when you're anxious about money, when the world seems to constantly message that your value is tied to your economic productivity and status. But it's true nonetheless. The strategies we've discussed throughout this conversation, understanding your money scripts, challenging catastrophic thinking, practicing mindfulness, setting boundaries, seeking support, being gentle with yourself, cultivating meaning beyond money, all of these are tools you can use. Not all of them will resonate with you, and that's fine. Take what's helpful and leave the rest. Progress isn't linear. You'll have good days and bad days, times when you feel like you're making headway, and times when you feel like you're back at square one. That's normal. That's how change actually works, not in a straight line upward, but in a messy, winding path that eventually trends in the direction you want to go if you keep at it. Financial anxiety may never completely disappear, and that's okay. The goal isn't to never worry about money. The goal is to have a healthy relationship with money, where concern motivates productive action rather than paralyzing you, where you can acknowledge challenges without being consumed by them, where money is one part of your life, but not the only part or the defining part. You're more resilient than you probably give yourself credit for. The fact that you're here, listening to this, seeking understanding and help, that shows strength and resourcefulness. You're not giving up. You're looking for ways to cope, to improve, to heal. That matters. That's significant. Whatever brought you to this conversation tonight, whether it's immediate financial crisis or long-term chronic anxiety, whether it's your own struggles or concern for someone you care about, I hope something here has been helpful. I hope you feel a little less alone, a little more understood, maybe a little more compassionate toward yourself. As we come to the end of our time together, I want to acknowledge you. Not just the you who's financially successful or who has it all figured out, but the you who's here right now, wherever you are in your journey. The you who's doing the best you can with what you have. The you who's still trying, even when it's hard. You matter. Your struggle is real and valid. Your efforts count, even when results aren't immediate. Take what you need from this conversation. Let go of what doesn't serve you. And remember, healing and change are possible. Not necessarily easy, not necessarily quick, but possible. You don't have to have all the answers right now. You just have to keep going. Keep being gentle with yourself. Keep reaching for support when you need it. The Discord community is waiting if you want it. Resources are available if you seek them out. And most importantly, you have within you the capacity to navigate this, to find your way through financial anxiety to a place of greater peace and stability, however long that journey takes. Rest now, if you can. You've been carrying a heavy load, and you deserve rest. Tomorrow will bring what it brings, and you'll meet it as best you can, just as you've met today. That's all any of us can do. Take it one day, one moment, one breath at a time. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. Thank you for caring enough about yourself to seek understanding and support. That's not nothing. That's everything. Take good care of yourself. Be patient with your process and know that you're not walking this path alone, even when it feels that way. Breathe. Rest. Tomorrow is another day, and you'll face it with whatever strength you have, which is enough. You are enough, exactly as you are, financial anxiety and all. Sweet dreams, peaceful rest, and gentle mornings ahead.